My family sent a group message. We've talked, and we think it's best if you step away for now. No explanation, no gratitude, just a dismissal. I replied, understood. I'll respect that and step away from the family entirely. Take care. That night at 3:17 a.m., I closed their $87,000 fund with a single click. By sunrise, my phone had 89 missed calls. My dad's voicemail said, "What happened? The bank flagged everything." So yeah, this happened about a year ago, but I'm finally ready to share this story. Sorry if this gets long, but I need to get it off my chest because honestly, it's been eating at me for months. It was a Thursday night around 7:00 p.m. I remember the exact time because I'd just gotten home from a brutal client meeting that ran 3 hours longer than planned. I was heating up some leftover curry and thinking about finishing this quarterly report for my consulting firm when my phone buzzed. Group message. The whole family was in there. Mom, Dad, my Aunt Carol, even Uncle Jim, who never really participates in these digital family discussions. The message was from Mom, short and brutally direct. We've discussed it, and we think it's best if you step away from the family for now. Rebecca needs space. We all do. I just stared at my phone for a full minute. The kitchen was dead silent except for the microwave humming. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. My Aunt Carol reacted with a thumbs up emoji within 30 seconds. Just like that, a simple thumbs up to cutting me out of the family, like I was some toxic acquaintance they needed to block. Uncle Jim added, "This is hard but necessary." Dad stayed silent, which somehow hurt more than if he'd piled on. I sat down at my kitchen table, curry getting cold, and typed back, "Understood. I'll respect that and step away from the family. Take care." I wanted to say more. I wanted to ask what I'd done wrong, wanted to defend myself, wanted to point out the irony of them cutting off their primary financial support. But I didn't. I hit send and put my phone face down on the counter. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about that message over and over, the casualness of it, the finality, the coordinated nature. They'd clearly discussed this without me, made a group decision about my place in the family like I was some kind of problem to be solved. Around 3:00 a.m., lying there staring at the ceiling, something clicked. Fine. They wanted me to step away? I'd step away completely. I got up, grabbed my laptop, and logged into the joint account I'd been managing for 5 years. You know, the one that paid for Mom's insulin, helped Dad with his mortgage payments, kept Rebecca's apartment afloat when her freelance graphic design work dried up for months at a time. The account had $3,247 in it at that moment, with my automatic monthly contribution of $1,500 scheduled to hit the next morning. I canceled the auto transfer. Then I transferred the remaining balance to my personal checking account. Then I closed the entire account. The whole process took maybe 10 minutes. 5 years of financial responsibility ended with a few mouse clicks at 3:17 a.m. My phone started going absolutely crazy at sunrise. 89 missed calls by the time I checked at around 8 a.m. Dad left this voicemail where he sounded shaky and panicked. "Lisa, what happened? The bank flagged everything. Mom's prescription bounced. The mortgage payment failed. Something about insufficient funds. Are you okay? Why would you do this? Call me back immediately." There were text messages flooding in too. "Mom, the pharmacy is saying there's no money for my insulin. What's going on?" "Rebecca, my rent check bounced and my landlord is freaking out. Did something happen to the account?" I just texted the group chat, "I am honoring your decision to step away." But here's the thing. They had absolutely no idea what they'd just done. They didn't realize how much I was quietly holding everything together behind the scenes. That message hit me like a betrayal because I'd been carrying them financially for years without asking for anything back, without even asking for basic respect or gratitude. This is that story, the story of how I became my family's financial life support and what happened when they decided to cut me out while expecting the money to keep flowing. To really understand why that group message felt like a knife to the chest, I've got to go back about 5 years. That's when everything started falling apart for my family, and somehow I became the designated fixer for problems I didn't create. Rebecca was in bad shape mentally. This was her second hospitalization for severe depression and anxiety in 18 months, and she'd been spiraling for weeks before Dad finally called me. I was at my desk working late on a client proposal when my phone rang at 9 p.m. Dad was crying in a pharmacy parking lot, which immediately sent my anxiety through the roof because Dad never cries. "She's not going to make it, Lisa," he said, voice cracking. "They won't admit her to the intensive program without upfront payment, and we're completely tapped out. The insurance is fighting everything, saying it's not medically necessary. I don't know what to do." I could hear Mom crying in the background and Dad trying to hold it together while explaining that Rebecca had been having panic attacks so severe she couldn't leave her apartment for days at a time. She'd lost her job at the marketing firm because she'd stopped showing up. Her savings were gone. Their savings were gone from helping her through the first crisis. I was 27 then, working insane hours as a business consultant but making decent money, around $85,000 annually, which felt like a fortune after growing up in a family that always struggled financially. That night, I didn't even hesitate. I logged into my savings account and transferred $15,000 directly to the treatment center. Just like that, my emergency fund was gone in one transaction. Everyone called it a miracle when Rebecca got stable after 3 months in the program. She came home looking healthier, talking about coping mechanisms and therapy techniques. The whole family treated it like divine intervention, but nobody ever mentioned that I made it possible. Nobody offered to pay me back either. Not that I expected it, really, but some acknowledgement would have been nice. But that was just the beginning. Within 6 months, Mom got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and her medication costs were astronomical. Dad's hours got cut at the warehouse where he'd worked for 15 years, some corporate restructuring nonsense that eliminated half the full-time positions. Every time something went wrong, every time another bill came in or another crisis hit, they'd call me. At first, it was small stuff. Just $300 for this month. We'll figure it out next time. But then Rebecca moved out and immediately fell behind on her rent. Then Mom needed dental work that insurance wouldn't cover. Then Dad's car needed major repairs. And without it, he couldn't get to work. One evening, after a particularly stressful day at work, Dad called with a proposition. "Lisa, we were thinking, would you be willing to help us set up something more permanent, like a family emergency fund? We hate asking you for money piece by piece like this." I was single, working 80-hour weeks, making good money. I lived in a small, one-bedroom apartment, drove a 10-year-old Honda, and had no social life because I was always either working or dealing with some family crisis. It made sense, right? They needed stability. I had the means to provide it. So I set up this account in my name and started routing payments through it. Mom's prescriptions, Rebecca's therapy co-pays, Dad's car payment when he fell behind, even their phone bill sometimes when things got tight. When they fell behind on other stuff, they gave me access to all their passwords and account numbers. Not because they trusted me exactly, but because they didn't want to deal with the hassle of managing their own financial disasters. They called me the responsible one, but what they really meant was the convenient one. The one who could be counted on to solve problems with money, instead of requiring them to make difficult choices or sacrifices. My life turned into this elaborate ledger of quiet sacrifices. I downgraded my apartment to a cheaper place in a worse neighborhood. I stopped taking vacations, couldn't afford them anymore. I ate instant ramen and peanut butter sandwiches for dinner more nights than I want to admit, all so I could keep being their financial safety net. The crazy part? None of them ever asked how I was doing. Not once. When I'd show up to family dinners exhausted from working 7 days a week, they'd barely acknowledge me before diving into discussions about Rebecca's latest crisis, Dad's job search, or Mom's newest doctor appointment. I became this background figure who existed solely to solve financial problems. I started keeping track of everything in a spreadsheet, not to be petty, but because the amounts were getting so large, I needed to understand where my money was going. By year 3, I was contributing over $1,800 monthly to keeping my family afloat, on top of random emergency payments that could be anywhere from $200 to $2,000. The worst part was watching them make the same mistakes over and over. Rebecca would get stable, start freelancing again, then take on way too many projects, burn out, and disappear for weeks. Dad would get temp work, spend the first paycheck on unnecessary stuff, then panic when the rent was due. Mom would skip taking her medication to save money, end up in the emergency room, and create a medical bill that wiped out any savings. But whenever I tried to suggest they needed to change their patterns, I became the bad guy. "You don't understand what it's like to struggle," Rebecca would say. "Easy for you to judge when you have a steady paycheck," Dad would add. Like I hadn't grown up in the same struggling household, like I hadn't worked my way through college while they took on debt, like success had just fallen into my lap. The thing about being everyone's bailout is that it becomes expected incredibly fast. What started as emergency help became routine support, and routine support became entitlement. Rebecca got into a terrible car accident in 2020. Completely not her fault. Some drunk driver ran a red light and T-boned her. She was in the hospital for a week with a broken collarbone and a concussion. While she was recovering, the insurance company started playing games. They wanted to dispute liability, delay payments, generally make her life miserable while she was already dealing with physical therapy and trauma. I paid for the personal injury attorney. $5,000 retainer. Just like that. The lawyer, a sharp woman, took one look at the police report and said the case was a slam dunk, but it might take 18 months to settle. Meanwhile, Rebecca couldn't work because of the head injuries and was having panic attacks about driving. Then Rebecca moved in with this guy, Tyler. Definitely bad news. I met him once at a family barbecue and immediately got sketchy vibes. He was one of those guys who talks big about his business ventures, but never seems to have any actual income. He'd order expensive meals when we went out, but somehow never had his wallet. Classic mooch behavior. Rebecca was completely infatuated, though. She moved into his apartment and started talking about how they were going to start a creative agency together. Within 3 months, she discovered he'd been using her credit cards to fund his business ideas and had been cheating on her with his ex-girlfriend. When she finally left him in the middle of the night, she literally fled with just her laptop and a suitcase. I was the one who sent her $12,200 for a hotel and groceries while she looked for a new place. Then I covered her security deposit and first month's rent when she found a studio apartment. Never saw a dime back from any of it, but at least she was safe. They never asked where all this money was coming from. They never saw the spreadsheet I kept to track my own expenses while trying to stay afloat and support everyone else. They just expected it, like I was some kind of government assistance program that existed solely for their benefit. The breaking point started around Christmas 2 years ago. I'd been particularly stressed about work. We were in the middle of a major client transition that required me to work basically every waking hour for 6 weeks straight. I was surviving on energy drinks and takeout, sleeping maybe 4 hours a night, and pushing myself to the absolute limit. Rebecca texted me on December 23rd, asking if I could buy her new tires for Christmas. Not requesting, asking if I could do it, like it was a given. Her car needed 4 new tires, and she'd gotten a quote for $800. This was right after I'd paid her rent that month because her biggest freelance client had delayed payment until after the new year. I was sitting in my office at 11 p.m., working on a presentation that was due the day after Christmas when her text came through. I just stared at it for a minute, feeling something break inside me. I typed back, "I just paid your rent this month. I can't cover both." The response was immediate. "Seriously, it's Christmas. I'm not asking for anything crazy." Then came the emotional manipulation. "Fine. I guess I'll just drive on bald tires and hope I don't die in a crash. But at least you'll have saved $800. When I didn't respond immediately, she went crying to my parents. Within an hour, I had Dad texting me, "Just try to be a little more understanding, Lisa. She's struggling with her mental health after everything with Tyler. You don't know how hard that is." That's when something in me just cracked. I didn't blow up or anything, but I started doing something different. I began documenting everything. Every dollar I sent, every bill I paid, every guilt trip they laid on me, every excuse they made. I created backups, emailed myself bank statements, took screenshots of conversations, not to hold it over them, but to remind myself it was real. To remind myself I wasn't imagining how much they were draining from me without ever saying thanks. That the sacrifices I was making were significant and meaningful, even if they couldn't see them. Meanwhile, my own life was falling apart. I was working myself to death, had zero savings beyond what I kept for absolute emergencies, couldn't even afford to go on dates because every spare dollar went to them. My apartment was a disaster because I was never home. I hadn't taken a real vacation in 3 years. I was eating dollar store food while paying for their restaurant meals. But when I tried to bring up my own stress, they'd change the subject or remind me how lucky I was to have a good job. Lucky, like I hadn't earned every dollar through 14-hour days and constant pressure. Like success had just been handed to me while they suffered through no fault of their own. The worst part was watching them waste the money I worked so hard to provide. Rebecca would Venmo me for groceries, then post Instagram stories from expensive restaurants. Dad would ask for help with utilities, then mentioned buying a new power tool the same week. Mom would need money for medical expenses, then show up wearing new jewelry. I started asking for receipts, and they acted like I was being controlling. "You don't trust us?" Rebecca asked, when I requested proof that the $300 I'd sent had actually gone to her therapist. "We're not your employees," Dad said when I asked him to forward me the actual utility bill instead of just telling me the amount. But they had no problem treating me like their personal bank account. Last month, everything came to a head in the most ridiculous way possible. Rebecca had been doing better. Therapy was helping. She'd landed a few good freelance contracts and had been consistently making her rent for 3 months straight. I was actually starting to feel optimistic that maybe, finally, the family was getting back on stable ground. Then she texted the family group at 10 o'clock a.m. on a Tuesday. "Hey, I know money's tight, but could the fund cover a wellness retreat in Colorado? It's for my mental health recovery, and my therapist thinks it would really help." I was in a client meeting when the message came through, so I didn't see it right away. When I checked my phone an hour later, there was already a whole conversation thread about it. A wellness retreat for $3,200, including airfare, accommodation, meals, and something called holistic healing workshops. I didn't answer right away. I wanted to see what everyone else would say first, because surely someone would point out how absurd this was. And Dad, the same guy I'd pulled out of overdraft twice last year, the same guy whose mortgage I'd been supplementing for 18 months, replied, "Sounds like something you really need, sweetheart. Let's see what we can do." Mom added a heart emoji and wrote, "Whatever helps you heal, honey." That's when it hit me like a freight train. They didn't just think they could use me. They expected it. They thought the fund was communal property, like I was some kind of silent donor who existed just to make their problems disappear. They were discussing spending over $3,000 of my money, like it was their money. I sat in my car outside the client's office staring at my phone, feeling this rage building up that I'd never experienced before. This wasn't an emergency. This wasn't medical treatment or rent or food. This was a vacation, an expensive vacation that cost more than most people make in a month, being discussed casually like it was a reasonable use of emergency funds. But the real kicker came 2 nights before that group message. We had our monthly family video call, something Mom had insisted on during the pandemic that somehow became permanent. Usually, these calls were just everyone updating each other on their lives, but this one felt different from the start. I'd been excited to share some good news for once. I had just landed this major client at work, a Fortune 500 company that wanted our firm to handle their entire digital transformation project. It was huge, career-defining huge, the kind of contract that would set me up for a promotion and finally give me some financial breathing room. "Guys, I've got some amazing news," I started, but Dad cut me off mid-sentence. "Sorry, Lisa, can we circle back to Rebecca's housing situation first? She doesn't feel safe in her current place, and we really need to figure out next steps." Rebecca jumped in. "Yeah, there was another break-in in my building last week, and my landlord isn't doing anything about security. I've been having panic attacks every time I hear noise in the hallway." They wanted to move her to a better neighborhood, a much better neighborhood. We spent the next 45 minutes looking at apartment listings online, with everyone chiming in about granite countertops, in-unit laundry, and gym access, places that were $800 to $2,200 more per month than her current studio. When I finally managed to bring up my work news again, Mom said, "Oh, that's nice, honey," and immediately pivoted back to discussing Rebecca's moving timeline. That's when I said it, calmly, without raising my voice. Maybe it's time someone else stepped up to help with this. The silence was ice cold. You could have heard a pin drop through the video call, like I'd said something offensive just by suggesting I shouldn't be the only one fixing everything. Mom jumped in first. "Honey, you know we would if we could, but you're the only one who's really stable right now." Stable. Another word for useful. Another way of saying the only one with money we can take. Rebecca started crying, actual tears. "I can't believe you're making this about money when I'm talking about my safety. I thought family was supposed to support each other." Dad tried to play peacemaker. "Now, Rebecca, your sister has done a lot for us. But Lisa, you have to understand, she's vulnerable right now. We can't just abandon her when she needs help. Abandon her, like setting boundaries was abandonment, like requiring other adults to solve their own problems was cruelty." I ended the call early that night, claiming I had work to catch up on. But I sat in my home office for hours afterward, staring at my financial spreadsheet. and $87,421 over 5 years, nearly $90,000 of my money, given freely, no questions asked, no gratitude expected. And they thought I was being selfish for suggesting that maybe, just maybe, someone else could contribute something. 2 days later came that group message. We think it's best if you step away for now. I realized later that the call had been a setup. They'd already decided to cut me out, probably so they could make financial decisions without my input. They wanted me gone so they could approve Rebecca's wellness retreat and figure out how to pay for her apartment upgrade without dealing with my negativity. What they didn't realize was that cutting me out meant cutting off the money too. In their minds, those were apparently two separate things. The reckoning. The fallout was immediate and absolutely brutal. Within 36 hours of closing the account, the overdraft notices started hitting like an avalanche. Mom's pharmacy called her Wednesday morning saying her prescription payment had been declined. The mortgage company called Dad at work in front of his coworkers, asking about the failed automatic payment. Rebecca's landlord sent her a text about the bounced rent check, complete with a photo of the NSF notice from his bank. But the phone calls to me were relentless. My phone was buzzing every few minutes with increasingly panicked messages. Mom called 17 times in 2 hours. Rebecca left this voicemail that started as a whisper and ended with her screaming, "Why would you do this? You knew I needed that payment by Sunday. My landlord is threatening eviction. You're going to make me homeless." The texts were even worse. Dad sent voice note after voice note, sounding like a man completely losing it. "Lisa, the mortgage bounced. The bank hit us with a $35 NSF fee, and now we're short for next month, too. I thought you handled the insurance payment, but that bounced too. The car insurance lapsed, and now they're saying we need to pay double to reinstate it. What did you do to the utilities account? ComEd is saying we're 3 months behind, but I thought you were covering that. The bank locked our checking account. They said there were multiple red flags from all the failed transfers. You need to fix this right now." Fix this, like I had broken something, instead of just stepping back like they explicitly asked me to do. The desperation in their voices was something I'd never heard before. For 5 years, I'd been quietly preventing these exact situations from happening. They'd never experienced the full weight of their financial choices because I'd always been there as a safety net. Now they were free-falling and suddenly realizing how far up they'd been. Mom left this heartbreaking voicemail. "Honey, I don't understand what's happening. I went to pick up my insulin and they said the account was closed. I'm scared to eat anything because I don't have my medication. Please call me back. Please, I raised you better than this." That last line was like a knife. I raised you better than this. Like basic financial boundaries were a moral failing on my part. They called a family Zoom meeting for Thursday evening. The second I joined, I could see it was an ambush. Mom's face was pale and drawn. Dad was pacing behind her like a caged animal. Rebecca had tears streaming down her cheeks. Aunt Carol was there too, sitting ramrod straight in her pearls, looking like we were in family court. Even Uncle Jim was on the call, which never happened unless someone had died. "Why did you do this to us?" Rebecca started before I'd even gotten my camera on. "You just abandoned us after everything we've been through together, after everything we mean to each other." I took a breath and tried to stay calm. "You sent me a group message telling me to step away from the family. I'm respecting your wishes." "We didn't mean financially," Mom interjected. "We just thought you needed some space from Rebecca's drama. We never said anything about the money." "Actually," I replied, "you said I should step away from the family. The money was part of my involvement with the family. If you wanted me out of family decisions but still wanted my financial support, you should have been more specific." Dad jumped in. "Don't be ridiculous. You know what we meant." "No, I really don't," I said, "because you made a group decision about me without including me in the conversation. You decided I was bad for Rebecca's mental health, bad for family dynamics, whatever, so I stepped away completely." That's when Rebecca really lost it. "Everything you've done for us? You mean after I paid your rent, funded your treatment, covered your emergencies, and got treated like garbage for saying no to your wellness retreat?" The room went quiet, except for Rebecca's sobbing. "You act like we never appreciated you," Mom said quietly. "But we did. We do. Your family." "Really?" I asked. "When's the last time any of you asked how I was doing? When's the last time anyone offered to help me with anything? When's the last time anyone even said thank you?" More silence. That's when I shared my screen and showed them the spreadsheet. 5 years of financial data. Every payment, every bill, every emergency transfer tracked with obsessive detail. Monthly contributions, emergency payments, insurance premiums, medical bills, rent supplements, car repairs, legal fees, utilities, groceries, therapy copays, prescription costs. The running total, $87,421.3. Dead silence. I watched their faces as they processed the number. Dad's mouth was actually hanging open. Mom looked like she was going to be sick. Rebecca had stopped crying and was just staring at the screen. "You've been keeping tabs on us?" Mom asked, horrified. "No," I replied. "I've been tracking my own expenses. I've been trying to understand why I can't afford to go on vacation or buy myself decent furniture or save for retirement. This is where my money has been going." Aunt Carol spoke up for the first time. $87,000. How is that possible? "Very easily," I said. $15,000 for Rebecca's treatment, $8,000 for Dad's mortgage supplements, $12,000 for Mom's medical expenses, $6,000 for Rebecca's apartment deposits and rent supplements, $5,000 for legal fees, $10,000 for car repairs and insurance. The list goes on and on. Dad tried the guilt trip. "We're family. Family helps family. You can't put a price tag on that." "You're right," I said. "Family helps family. But this hasn't been helping. It's been enabling. You've all made the same financial mistakes over and over because you knew I'd catch you when you fell. You never had to learn from consequences because there weren't any consequences." Rebecca found her voice again. "So what? You're just going to let us lose everything? You're going to let Mom go without her medication? You're going to let me become homeless?" "I'm going to let you all handle your own problems like adults," I said, "the same way I handle mine." "But you don't have problems like ours," Mom protested. "You have a good job, you're educated, you don't have mental health issues." "I work 80 hours a week to afford my life and yours," I interrupted. "I haven't taken a vacation in 3 years. I live in a crappy apartment and eat ramen for dinner so I can pay your bills. You think I don't have stress? You think I don't have problems? The difference is I solve them myself instead of calling someone else to fix them with money." The call ended with Rebecca sobbing, Mom saying I'd changed and that money had made me cold, and Dad promising they'd figure something out without me. Money hadn't made me cold. Being used had made me smart. I thought cutting them off would be the end of it, but it got worse. Way, way worse. 10 days after that Zoom call, I got an email from a random Gmail account with no subject line. Just a bunch of screenshots attached. Rebecca's eviction notice, dated for the following week. Power company warnings for both my parents' house and Rebecca's apartment. Denied credit applications. Looks like they'd been trying to get loans, credit cards, anything to replace my financial support. They were falling apart fast, and somehow it was still my fault. The email was unsigned, but I'm pretty sure it was from Aunt Carol, based on the passive-aggressive tone of the file names. "What you caused, JPG." And "This is what stepping away looks like, PNG." Then Mom showed up at my office on a Friday afternoon. I was in a client meeting when my assistant knocked on the door, looking uncomfortable. "Your mother is here," she whispered. "She says it's an emergency." Mom was sitting in the lobby looking like death warmed over, pale, shaking, clutching a manila envelope like it contained her last hope. She'd lost weight. Her clothes were wrinkled, and she had this desperate look in her eyes that I'd never seen before. "I didn't know where else to go," she said when I brought her into a conference room. "Your dad's sleeping on the couch because we can't afford the electric bill and the house is freezing. Rebecca hasn't left her room in days because she's too ashamed to face her landlord. We've applied for assistance programs, but everything takes weeks and we need help now." She opened the envelope and spread out a stack of bills like she was dealing cards. Past due notices, final warnings, disconnection threats. The total was staggering. Over $4,000 in immediate needs just to keep them from losing utilities and housing. Then she played her last card. "I raised you. I gave you life. I changed your diapers. Stayed up nights when you were sick. Worked double shifts to pay for your school clothes. This is how you repay us? By watching us suffer when you could help?" I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the audacity was breathtaking. "You gave me life, and then spent 30 years convincing me I owed you for it. You raised me to believe that family means sacrificing everything for people who won't sacrifice anything for you." "That's not fair," she said, tears starting to flow. "We would help you if we could." "When?" I interrupted. When have you ever helped me? When I was working 3 jobs to pay for college? When I was eating pasta every night so I could send you grocery money? When I haven't been on a date in 2 years because every spare dollar goes to your emergencies? She didn't have an answer for that. But the real bombshell came a week later. I was at home on a Saturday morning, finally enjoying a leisurely breakfast for the first time in years, when a thick envelope arrived via certified mail. Bank letterhead marked Urgent Fraud Investigation. Inside were 20 pages of documentation about a business loan application that had been flagged by their fraud department. Someone had applied for $80,000 using my name, social security number, and the tax ID from the family fund account. The business was called Rebecca Grace Recovery Services, LLC. According to the paperwork, it was a consulting company that provided mental health services to corporate clients. Complete fiction. The signature on the application looked like mine, but was just different enough that a handwriting expert would be able to spot it as a forgery. Mom and Dad were listed as co-signers, which meant they were directly involved in this scheme. If I hadn't closed that account when I did, the loan might have gone through. They'd apparently been planning this for weeks, maybe months. They weren't just using me. They were trying to frame me for a loan I never agreed to take. The whole stepping away from the family thing wasn't spontaneous hurt feelings. It was a calculated setup. Cut me from the fund discussions, but keep my name and social security number attached. Take the money and let me deal with the legal and financial consequences. I spent that entire weekend filing reports with everyone I could think of. The bank's fraud department, the police, the IRS, the state attorney general's office, the credit reporting agencies. Every keystroke felt like therapy. Every form I filled out was another step toward protecting myself from people who were supposed to love me. The police detective assigned to the case was this older guy who looked like he'd seen everything twice. Family fraud is more common than you'd think, he told me during our first meeting. Usually it's parents stealing from kids, but sometimes it goes the other way. Adult children taking advantage of elderly parents. This situation, though, family members trying to use someone as a financial resource while simultaneously setting them up for fraud, that's a new one for me. He walked me through what would happen next. They'd investigate the loan application, interview everyone involved, possibly press charges depending on what they found. He advised me to freeze my credit, change my banking passwords, and document every interaction I'd had with my family regarding money. You did the right thing, closing everything when you did, he said. If this loan had gone through, you'd be on the hook for $80,000 plus interest, and proving you didn't authorize it would have been a nightmare. When the investigators contacted my parents, Dad called me that evening, crying, not apologizing, crying because they got caught. His voice was shaking as he tried to explain. We were desperate, Lisa, really desperate. Rebecca was going to be homeless. Your mother was rationing her insulin. I thought I might lose the house. We thought if we could just get enough to stabilize everything, we'd find a way to pay it back before you ever found out. You thought you'd commit fraud in my name and I'd never find out? I said, incredulous. We didn't see it as fraud. We saw it as borrowing from family. You've always been there for us, and we figured this was just a more formal way of getting help. A more formal way? You forged my signature on a loan application. You used my social security number without permission. That's not borrowing from family. That's identity theft. He was quiet for a long moment. I know how it looks, but we never meant to hurt you. We were just trying to survive. By destroying my credit and potentially making me liable for a loan I didn't take? What if I hadn't caught this? What if the bank hadn't flagged it? I could have been ruined financially and never known why. That was the last conversation we had. Because what do you say to someone who thinks loving you means they're entitled to steal from you? It's been almost a year now since I closed that fund. Since the 3 a.m. Phone calls and 89 missed voicemails. Since they tried to forge my name on an $80,000 loan application. And I can honestly say I've never been happier. The first few months were rough, not going to lie. I felt guilty constantly, second-guessing myself every day. I'd wake up wondering if Mom had been able to afford her medication, if Rebecca was sleeping in her car, if Dad had lost the house. The programming of 30 years doesn't just disappear overnight, but slowly the guilt started to fade. I stopped waking up to dozens of missed calls. My phone became quiet. My bank account stopped hemorrhaging money. I started cooking real meals again. I took a weekend trip, my first vacation in over 3 years, and paid for it in cash without a single pang of anxiety. I upgraded my apartment furniture, replacing the sagging couch I'd been holding onto since college. I started putting money into a retirement account. For the first time since my mid-20s, I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck despite having a good salary. More than the financial changes, it was the mental shift that freed me. I realized how much of my identity had been tied to being the responsible one, the fixer, the family safety net. And without that role, I wasn't broken. I was lighter. Of course, there were attempts to pull me back in. Mom emailed me on my birthday with a 2-line message. Happy birthday, Lisa. Hope you're well. Can we talk about a small favor? Rebecca sent a Christmas card with a handwritten note about how the holidays were hard without me, followed by, do you think you could spot me just until the new year? I didn't respond to either. Because here's the truth. I don't owe them my stability. I don't owe them my savings, my credit, my sanity. Family can be love and support, but it can also be manipulation and control. And cutting them off wasn't cruelty. It was survival. People like to say you can't put a price on family. I can. It's $87,421.13, and I've already paid it.